Hey, we are continuing the Rooted series on people in the Old Testament, and today I get to talk to you about Isaac. And Isaac is kind of an overlooked character, I guess, in many ways. His dad is Abraham, and of course, Brother Frank's been through 3 weeks with Abraham, and I'm sure not gotten nearly all of the things of Abraham's life. But then his son is Jacob, and Jacob is the man whose name is changed to Israel. And I'll try not to steal any of Ben's thunder about talking about Jacob, but Isaac's kind of between these two guys, and we might miss some things about him. And I want to call attention to one thing particularly. It's going to be eventually in Genesis chapter 24, but think about the start of Isaac's life. Isaac's the child of the promise, right? He's the one who's been promised to his mother. I mean, while I'm sure that was a great blessing, Isaac was certainly loved by his mother and father. Also, maybe a little pressure there, being the child that God promised and living up to that. I'm sure there was some things with that, but also think about the fact that his father was 100 and his mother was somewhere in her 90s. You think your parents didn't understand you? Gosh, what kind of technology did he have that his folks were trying to figure out? No, of course not. But quite the age difference. It was a very different deal. The generational thing had to be a little bit of an oddity. Yeah, of course, we might focus on that he was almost sacrificed, almost killed by his father as a sacrifice to God, and that's a crazy story. I invite you to look it up. But really, that happened to Isaac. We don't really have much about what that looked like from Isaac's perspective. Now, I'll just tell you, when I get to heaven, I would like to talk to him about that. I would like to know how that went, and there's some questions I have there. But for today, I want to look at this story in Genesis chapter 24 of finding a wife for Isaac. And it's crazy in its own way, right? I mean, there's some things we don't understand. Abraham sends his servant to find a wife for Isaac out of Rebekah's family, and or it is Rebekah, but out of Sarah's family. And their way of sealing the deal is not shaking hands, but Abraham invites the servant to place his hand under his thigh, and we go, what's that about? But then he goes and he finds this woman, and he prays for the Lord's direction, and he's led straight to her, and he gets to bring her home, and there's a lengthy process there. But then it says this at the end of chapter 24, towards the end, starting in verse 63. It says, "In the early evening, Isaac went out to walk in the field, and looking up, he saw camels coming. Rebekah looked up, and when she saw Isaac, she got down from her camel and asked the servant, 'Who is that man in the field coming to meet us?' The servant answered, 'It is my master.' So she took her veil and covered herself. Then the servant told Isaac everything that he had done. And Isaac brought her into the tent of his mother Sarah and took Rebekah to be his wife. Isaac loved her, and he was comforted after his mother's death." Now, I'm a dad of a teenage daughter, so to me, arranged marriages make more sense all the time, right? But this is what that is. This is a wife that Isaac doesn't get to pick. God has chosen for him. He might say others have chosen her for me, but really this whole story is very clear that God has led the servant to her and granted him success, and she comes home. And that's the word for us that I think particularly out of Isaac's life. And he doesn't get it always right. And later Isaac will make mistakes. He plays favorites with his sons, and it's a bad deal. But this part he gets right. He trusts God's provision. And there are lots of us probably who need to have a little lesson in that. Trusting what God brings our way. Man, we think of all kinds of ways this could be better or different, or if I had been doing it, here's what would have happened. And we just need to trust that what God has brought us to, he can bring us through. And what he has brought us, what circumstance he's brought us to, he intends to use for his glory. Sometimes we get there by sin or other people's sin, and it's not a good situation, but God still uses it. And I'd specifically say a word to those of us who are married. Some days, and some of you may be in crisis in your marriage right now, the story of Isaac reminds me that God can make love where there's nothing. He can bring love between two people where they have no reason to start with, but he creates that. And he can create a better day for your marriage. And there are lots of circumstances that I don't know the ins and outs of, and some marriages bring danger to people. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people where they've just said, I don't love this person anymore. God can fix that. I invite you to trust him for that. Whatever God has brought you to today, I invite you to trust God's provision. And maybe there's a point you just need to stop and say today, God, I don't know why what's going on is going on, but I want to know what you have for me. I encourage you to look to him for that. And if you have questions, by all means, reach out to us here at Union Hill. You can check out our website, uhbc.us, and you can find some ways to contact us there. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.